My name is Kuijt. I'm going to be shepherding this group of people through their presentations and to sort of hopefully draw on conversations related to what's been termed sort of cultural wars, thinking in terms of soft power, memory, and thinking about identity in some form. Very quickly, before doing that, I wanted to briefly highlight something, thinking in terms of the conversations that have been going on, in terms of hope, in terms of memory, what sort of holds together this group of papers from the different scholars that we have here, and thinking about it, looking at some of the key words and some of the different aspects to this, and in some ways coming back to some of these brilliant conversations about hope and memory that we've been seeing in so many different ways. And as part of that, I was really struck by how one particular example, and I want to go to interspecies moments here for just a second, and thinking in terms of how conversations about reframing hope, reframing memory have sort of connected together. And the example I want to give is this one. This is Patron, the dog sniffing dog. This is a photograph I took a number of years ago in a very empty street in Cherniv in an early morning, and walking out and seeing this picture of the dog. And of course, for background here, this is a famous dog now, one of the most famous dogs in Ukraine, obviously, that is an emblem of hope, of solidarity, of independence, and of resilience in so many different ways. So much so that when you think about it, this illustration here shows you this. This is a dog that has his own web page, has his own wiki page, has cartoons that are being designed, and sort of the sense of resistance and the sense, especially from this dog being from Cherniv, this sense of hope and aspiration in a really interesting way. One that brings, from my standpoint, anyways, as a Canadian American, brings this element of humor that is crystallized in so many different ways. The comment was made last night, the idea of humor and the importance of humor in different ways. And I think that's one of the real strengths of this as an emblem with Patron the dog in some form. Here's an example of Patron sniffing out one of the bombs that he's identified at some point. The other parts to it that I take great pleasure in is that there's also an internationalism that is connected to Patron and this broader sense of awareness in so many different ways. So, what you can't read here, but you can see with the wiki page, how many of our pets and dogs have wiki pages on their own? Not many. If you look at the wiki page and the photograph, the inset of this cute one, this is Patron getting an award in June of 2022 from the Irish Kennel Club. So that Patron is being recognized for his services and in terms of Ireland. The other international element to it that I take great pleasure in as a Canadian is that the individual on the right looking down at Patron is Justin Trudeau, the outgoing Canadian Prime Minister who's been a good friend of Ukraine. So thinking about that as just one of these interesting examples under which you have, even in simple little moments, this construction of memory, the reconstruction of history and memory, because this is what this is what younger children are growing up with now, is this sense of this is an active agent, a dog as an active agent and an emblem of resistance. I find it delightful in so many different ways. Okay, having said that, if we could go to the first presentation, please. What I'd like to do is introduce our first speaker, and you'll have to excuse me if I bring this over here. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time in introductions because my hope is to hear your words and our conversations that emerge after, rather than the accomplishments that have taken place from our speakers in some form. So please give a warm welcome for Olga Filippova, who is going to be presenting her paper here. And you should be able to just do this.
I tried already. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity to be here. And also thank you for coming particularly to this panel. I was not going to talk about some issue about dog, but Jan just pushed me to talk, to give you some information. I'm now in Finland since March 22. And I'm still affiliated with Kharkiv University and I teach online. But in Finland, I'm also affiliated with Karelian Institute, University of Eastern Finland. And it was not my choice to come to Finland. It was my Finnish colleague who literally organized salvation operation for us, for me, for my family, and for my dog Winston, corgi dog Winston. And now he's a big star in this town, city, Joensuu. And many people knows me not as Olga Filippova as a researcher, but as a Winston's mother. Because we had, among many other research projects, we have community-based community-based art research project, and we have film, Where is Your Home, Winston? This is film about Ukrainian refugee escaping from war to other countries, particularly to Finland, through the eyes of a dog. So hope, friendship, losing home and constructing new home, and question where is our home is very important. And this hope in this issue, where is our home is the main stone or foundation for us to think and to live. And now I turn one day, I hope you will see this film. A couple of days ago, we had screening first in the United States in Indiana University in Bloomington. Hopefully, it will be more wider, and someday you can see this film as well. But now I would like to turn to another my project. I'm involved in right now, and we just started in last summer. And this project is about migration, not only physical migration, but also the main issue is it possible? And if so, how and for what to immigrate into history? Now we have a lot of Ukrainian war migrants in different countries. And they are not just bodies in these countries. There's also people with knowledge, people with their perception of past. And it is really very important to see how interaction in this sphere of past, a perception of past, is going on. Finland is very interesting case in this situation. Finland, yeah, so, does memory politics matters in migrants' integration? And if so, how and for what? And also another question is, when Ukrainians will come back to Ukraine, what perception, what knowledge they will bring, and what reconsiderations they bring about ourselves, about our past, about politics of memory. So this project is a big project, and I will tell today just a small part from this project regarding Ukrainians. So regarding Finland context, Finland became countries in 19th. Finland has turned from the country of immigration to the immigration country. And you can see here numbers of immigrants, but it's data up to 2021. Now situation changed cardinally, and still Russian-speaking population consists the majority of migrant minority in Finland, and the second largest group is Ukrainians. And you can see here that Ukrainians in 2020 first consist just only 7,000 of members of Finnish society, and now it's almost 30,000. So, also regarding context, Finland has the biggest border with Russia in European Union countries. And also history of Finland has very common with Ukrainian history as well. So they exist in between two empires, Swedish Empire and Russian Empire. But Finland was lucky to keep their independence, which Ukraine was not able to do at the beginning of 20th century. So our project is about how Ukrainians in this new Finnish, new for them, Finnish memory landscape reconsider Second World War in connected with this current Russo-Ukrainian war. Okay. Also regarding context in Finland. In Finland, popular discourse, they do not use term Second World War. For academicians, they use this term, but for popular discourse, this is three wars during that period. Winter War, which in post-Soviet, in Soviet and post-Soviet society is known as Finska Vina, Soviet Union Finnish War. Yeah, but in Finland it is Winter War. Also, Second War is War of Continuation, where Finland has to collaborate with Germany, and it was the main point after war decision by Soviet Union how to treat Finland. And third war, it was Lapland War, where Finns had to struggle with German troops in Laplandia. So this winter war continues to shape Finland's collective memory. And for migrants, it's some kind of entrance tickets. So you should to share this idea of importance of this winter war. Finns have like slogan 3S of Finnish nationhood. It is sisu, sauna, and Sibelius. Sisu is something that it's very difficult to translate. It's like main basic of Finnish resilience. Resilience which made Finns like they are now. So, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Another context, which is really very important and has particular influence in Finnish situation, is Russia and its perception about Second World War, which is in Russia is Great Patriotic War. And again, taking into account how many Russians are in Finland now, it is really very important to think about this. And context of Ukraine regarding politics of memory and Second World War. And this is also very important because Ukrainian migrants, war migrants, they brought this perception about Second World War with them to their host countries. So in Ukraine, as you know, it was shifting in consideration regarding this period. And from narratives of Great Patriotic War, Ukraine came to narratives of Second World War. And it was not so smoothly for Ukraine. But now we see this distancing from these post-Soviet or Russian narratives of Great Patriotic War. But in Ukraine, still we have not solve all the issue regarding Second World War. And here you see picture of memory, main memory park in Kiev. And if we have the end of war, 1945, but what is about the beginning of war, it's still unclear. So these two numbers, 1941, were deleted from this monument, but new one was not established. And now I turn to particular result of this research. So the main idea with this research is to use sensory ethnography, and we bring participants to some memory sites, which is important in Finnish memory landscape, we have like excursion with a lot of information, and after that we conduct dialogue about discussion about what they have seen. And we started with cemetery in CTU in Seoul, and it was really very important knowledge for Ukrainians how hierarchy does not exist among soldiers and officers, which kind of surprise for Ukrainians. And this is also very important how we will treat and remember this current war in Ukraine and how we use this slogan, Heroям Slava, but will we have this equality for all heroes? And so Finland give up, oh my God, Finland give us this very important notion. At all? Or another very important issue is about winter war and this Suomi Rantie-tier. It's Winter War Museum. And here you can see two monuments. When we were there, it was just to read this quotation from our discussion. The main idea is that Ukrainians do not know about this winter war. And Finns use Ukrainians came to Finland. Why Ukrainians? Because it was Ukrainian division inside of this Red Army troops. And Finns use this. For Ukrainians, it was kind of shock that we are struggling now, right now we are struggling, but we participated in some very dark events. And it was really big discussion between Ukrainian group, how we have to treat this situation. And it brought a lot of reconsideration and a lot of hope as well. Well, if I don't have time anymore, I just would like to bring a final point. Why we have to talk and think about Finnish case and Second World War. Many Ukrainians say that Finnish case, Finnish past, Finnish history and presence, past and presence give us a lot of hope because Finland lost their territory. Finland was treated very badly after Second World War by Soviet Union, but hope was the foundation to make Finland great. And this is kind of hope and example how can we live in situation, in dramatic situation, and so hope for prosperity and great country. Sorry, I was not able to say everything I was planned. Probably Winston took time more.
Okay, thank you very much. Now our next presenter is Olena Kovalenko. Please come on up. And it's just the green button and the red for going backwards.
Thank you. Hello to everyone. I'm very privileged to be here today and stand here in front of such a distinguished and supportive audience who came here to Notre Dame for such a extremely important occasion as opening the Ukrainian Studies Hub. I will be speaking today as a representative of the Ukrainian Institute, as a practitioner who is working in the very fragile yet resilient field of culture diplomacy. So my perspective comes from the field rather than academic desk. And in my talk, I would like to offer you a few insights into the threats, the opportunities that we see in the culture diplomacy as we enter 2025. But before talking about the risks and the opportunities, I would like to say a few words about Ukrainian Institute, because we have a few Ukrainian Institute in America, in London, in Sweden. So my Ukrainian Institute is affiliated with Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And this is the institution with a mission of strengthening Ukraine's international presence through culture diplomacy. It was established in 2018. Here should be the slide already. Yes. It was established in 2018 and in 17 and operational since 2018. In these 6 years of operation, the team has grown from 10 people to almost 60. We have opened 2 offices, one in Berlin and one in Paris. We have increased our outreach from 100,000 viewers in 2018 to 198 million viewers in 2024. Throughout these 6 years, we have been working in the art sectors such as literature, film, music, performing, and visual arts, but also in academic programs, in research and analytics. And we have conducted over 750 projects in 87 countries. So this is a very active and vibrant community who is working for the culture diplomacy. Simultaneously, from 2018, the very concept of culture diplomacy gradually gained recognition in Ukraine, both in Ukraine's public discourse, but also in policymaking. And today it forms a cornerstone of MFA's public diplomacy strategy for 21-25. I will briefly discuss the threats, and I will start from something that I call a challenged agency. So first and most pressing challenge is chronic underfunding of culture, and culture in Ukraine has historically been a low budgetary priority, so when the cuts were happening in times of crises, it was the culture to be cut first. Since 2022, the sector survived largely thanks to the support of foreign partners and donors, whose support now often surpasses state funding 3 to 4 times over. And on this graph, you will see the budget of Ukrainian Institute, and you will see that funds raised from partners were increasing gradually from 2021 to 24, and it was like 3 times more than the state funding that we had in the last year. Sorry, my voice is trembling. It shouldn't happen like this. Yeah, so with this amount of donor funding, we face a problem because the donor funds are mostly short term by nature, making learn time strategic planning nearly impossible for us. In such conditions, it's much more difficult to build sustainable partnerships or commit to long term projects or programs with our partners. In addition, there is a challenge that the formats and topics of projects can be determined by the conditions of the grant, which poses a challenge for the institution's agency for us. Another unavoidable threat is the physical destruction of Ukrainian culture. We all know that effective representation of the country abroad must rely on strong and capable institutions within the country, and the war has inflicted tremendous damage on all Ukraine's culture sector, film production, museums, publishing, theater, and many more spheres. Many specialists have left the country or changed their professions. Russia has damaged or destroyed over 2,000 Ukrainian objects of culture infrastructure. You will see more numbers here. So it's over 780 libraries, 120 museums and galleries, 39 theaters, and over 1,300 objects of cultural heritage. We do not have data on how many artists paused their careers, put on military uniforms, and went to fight, nor do we have accurate data on how many have been killed in action or killed at war. The Ministry of Culture reports 183 artists killed, while the civil initiative Недописані, or Disrupted Writings, reports 235 people from the literary sector alone killed by Russia. So paradoxically, but cultural diplomacy may once find itself without culture in Ukraine. And the third thread that I would like to refer here is that amidst this huge threat, it's the disproportionately large disinformation machine of Russian cultural propaganda. In 2023 and 2024, we witnessed the comeback of Russian representatives and artists to an international culture events, highlighting the inefficiency of culture cancel Russia policy that some of Ukrainian institutions implemented. In fact, Ukrainian culture diplomacy has a dual task. On the one hand, introducing Ukraine to those who is not familiar with the country and with the culture, and on the other hand, dispelling stereotypes and prejudice about Ukraine that was formed by Russia throughout the years. And the studies that were performed by Ukrainian Institute in 2020, the studies of Ukraine perception abroad, revealed a number of Ukrainian cultural phenomena and figures that foreigners very often associate with Russia, such as Gogol, Malevich, Tatlin, Ekster, Burluk, and many others who form so-called Russian avant-gardes. So there is a huge number of people who are thought to be Russian art, but in fact they are representatives of Ukrainian artistic scene. And from the very first days of full-scale invasion, many Ukrainian cultural actors and public intellectuals adopted the terminology of and frameworks of the colonial studies, explaining the causes of Russian aggression to Ukraine, to foreigners criticizing biased and condensing views on Ukrainian culture and history. However, this discussion very often framed Ukraine in relation to Russia, placing us in a very reactive position rather than defining our own agenda. So the problem here is that in condition of limited resources, the choice between reaction and proaction can really be very difficult for us. So we have to choose whether to talk about Ukraine or to talk about that Ukraine is not Russia, which is still partly talking about Russia. So with this, I would like to turn to the brighter side of what I was going to tell and talk about the spaces of hope that we see today in 2025. Um, and while some speak about the closing window of attention for Ukraine, we really see the unprecedented global demand and interest towards Ukrainian culture and need for cooperation with Ukraine. According to the Global Soft Power Index, an international survey of the perception of national brands, Ukraine recognition skyrocketed in 2022. Since the start of full-scale invasion, all of Ukraine's indicators in this index have been significantly high compared to 2021, with Ukraine jumping from the 61st place to the 37th, and no other country made such a big jump in history. Although in 2022 we dropped back to the 46th place, the recognition score is still quite high. So actually, if you see the familiarity score, it's 7.3 out of 10, which is quite high. And it shows that foreigners do know that Ukraine exists, but at the same time, the influence, the reputation are quite lower. So it shows that there is a sphere, there is an opportunity for us to explain Ukraine to those who already know about Ukraine. So we really see it as one of the biggest opportunities right now. Are also witnessing a significant political turbulence around the world, with attention to shifting to other crises and other conflicts, and growing fatigue from Ukraine and growing fatigue from sympathy to Ukraine. And this fatigue is disappearing when we start presenting ourselves solely as victims, when we stop presenting ourselves solely as victims. Constantly showing images of war destruction becomes overwhelming. But this is not the only part of Ukraine's present history. We also have a legacy of struggle, heroism, and fantastic civil solidarity. Those elements of our dynamic culture and creative culture that Ukraine possesses right now. The previously mentioned research of Ukraine's global perception revealed number of Ukrainian cultural phenomena and figures who has potential interest to sustain global interest in Ukraine. These include Maria Primachenko, the Boychukists, Shevchenko, Archangel Krimsky, Volodymyr Horovits, Les Kurbas and the Berezil Theater, Alexander Dovzhenko, Sergei Korolev, Ivan Mazepa, and the artists of the executed Renaissance. Culture diplomacy is perhaps the only effective way to promote Ukrainian narratives in politically complex regions. In 2023, the geographic scope of the Ukrainian Institute's work expanded to 8 countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America, where we carried out 16 projects in 2024. And we're currently completing the research on the Ukraine's perception in these countries. And the research in India, Indonesia, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Mexico, and Brazil, we see that there are some promising fields to cooperate with those countries. For example, in Nigeria, those are visual arts, film, and fashion. For India, it's musical and performing art. And for almost every country within this list, the development of Ukrainian and Crimean Tatar studies is a very promising area. So we can start building connections with those countries who are politically more challenging for us, but culturally it can be a way to start cooperation here. And the last point I would like to make is the added value of culture, because promoting culture requires framing it within the context of the present day. It is not enough to simply emphasize that the value that culture has value, but we must highlight its added value, what this culture can offer to the world today. How can it help us confront global challenges, understand the war, prevent it, or finish it quicker? How can it foster coexistence and mutual understanding? In this context, the added value of Ukrainian culture is immense. It embodies dignity, subjectivity, independence, reclaiming the right to have a voice, hope, resilience, and justice. Universal values that are important to people on different continents during the times of political turbulence in which we live. And I will finish with a picture of that shows the moment from the notes from Ukraine, the project which we created with Razum for Ukraine, Ukrainian and US embassies. This was a concert in the Carnegie Hall that continued Ukraine's cultural diplomacy mission, echoing events from a century ago when the Ukrainian Republic Capella performed Shchedrik, known as Carol of the Bells, for the first time in the US. In the 1920s, during extremely challenging historical conditions, the Ukrainian state recognized culture as a powerful tool to protect and build the country's international recognition. And today, 100 years later, we find ourselves in favorable conditions, I hope. And as it has been already cited from Václav Havel, we believe that everything we do in culture diplomacy is worth doing no matter how it turns out in the end. Thank you.
All right, if we could have our next speaker, please. Christina Kozak, if you'd like to come up, please. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. I'm a graduate student in Notre Dame, so I'm trying to survive for my spring break. I don't have a presentation, so sorry for that, but I guess I will try to guide you for my notes without presentation. So I would like to present to you today actually my capstone project, one of the chapter of my capstone project, which I will be defending this month at Notre Dame. I was working at the Register of Damages for Ukraine in The Hague for the last 6 months. So my program has the last semester spent in a field, and that was my field research in The Hague, working with them as a legal advisor. So I get there some knowledge, and I will start thinking how it's possible to incorporate the register and how potentially the register can evolve into a memory project if it potentially can evolve at all. I will shortly tell you something about the register so you have some background of that. The International Register of Damages for Ukraine, which sit in The Hague, is an international institution which was created only in 2023, actually, like quite recently. And it only started on rolling basis, accept the claim from people who suffered from the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Register is not a standalone institution. Register has a mandate to document the Russian wrongdoing, international wrongdoing, but does not have mandate to compensate. At the same time, the Claim Commission for Ukraine should be established soon. The signature for establishment the Claim Commission will be open in March this year. Register is now currently is under Council of Europe. Normally, such institution is being created under United Nations, but obviously Russia shamefully hold the seat as permanent member in the Security Council. So it was obvious that it was not possible to establish the Claim Commission or the register within United Nations system. So it was created in the Council of Europe. There is two reasons why I thought that register has a potential to evolve into memory and two objective. Firstly, as Ukrainian, I thought that I don't want us as Ukrainians to forget what Russians did to us, and I'm sad no Putin, because it was all Russians who did it to us. And secondly, considering that now the facts about the invasion and even there is a question whether Russia invaded Ukraine is in a public agenda, there is a need actually to uplift the messages and also uplift the voices of victims who are affected by the Russian aggression. And there is two reasons why the register can be transformed into memory project. Often when people hear register of damages, they think that register is only only try to document the damages of property. At the same time, it's not true. It's just like very superficial analysis of the register. The register has 46 categories of damages, losses, and destruction. Actually, my colleague Olena, who was just talking about the cultural damage and the damage of cultural infrastructure, it's one of the category which the state of Ukraine can submit to the register of damage to the Hague to collect to have a clear list of the reparation and to have a cost. However, we know that like cultural heritage, which was destructed, cannot be evaluated by money. It's obvious. So, how the categories of the register works? It's divided by three groups based on the type of the legal person, the personality. The first one, A, is for natural persons. The second is for state of Ukraine, B category, and the third is for legal entities. I will focus for the purpose of this speech only for the categories for the natural person, because like I think that the legal entities will not contribute that much to the memory and the narrative what happened to people and on the ground. Basically, there is 21 categories for submission of which will be open for a natural person, and only 7 of them are about destruction of property. 2/3 of them are about non-material damages, which normally is the mandate of Truth Commission in other contexts, such as torture, deportation of children, deportation of adults, forced displacement, internal, external displacement, sexual violence, loss of access to the healthcare, loss of access to education. So basically, the overwhelming majority of the categories are not about property, are more about suffering of human being, which the register is trying to record. And the second objective, the second reason why I thought it's possible, I was working in The Hague with a lady who worked in 2000 in Germany in a compensation program for the victims of the Holocaust. So Germany in 2000 opened the Holocaust Victim Asset Program with Swiss banks, with Switzerland banks, and also in Germany, the German Forced Labor Compensation Commission. And people all over the globe, the survival of the Holocaust, started submitting claims and naming the concentration camps, which was not known before. And it was apparent that we know about the Holocaust not as much as we thought, because we know only about a big concentration camp, but we do not focus on smaller amount of concentration camps, which also existed in Germany and also in Eastern Europe. So I was thinking that considering that the register is open not only for submission from the governmental controlled area, but also from the occupied territory in Ukraine, we potentially can understand the scale of atrocities which happen also from the victims. Because for us, for Ukraine, it only become available and the scale of atrocities is only visible after the deoccupation of the territory, and considering that a lot of like now 25% of Ukrainian territory is still under occupation and millions of people of Ukrainians living there and has a right to submit a claim, it's a potential for the register to collect all of this rich data about the victim suffering. Also, I was thinking how potentially it can actually be transformed into memory project. And when I was in The Hague, I was talking because it's my topic of my research. I was asking people and I was talking with them like, let's talk whether it's even potential to transform it. And obviously, I understood that currently, with the ongoing mandate, it's not really possible because it's overburdening. You overburden the institution with additional mandate, and the institution cannot fulfill its current mandate. At the same time, it's also normal and feasible from what I have seen in the history of the similar reparation institution that normally the legacy and the memory projects, they expand only after the closure of the mandate. For instance, Notre Dame hosts the legacy project of the Columbia Truth Commission. This is one of the best legacy projects I have ever seen. And when I was talking with the director of the legacy project, I understood that when the mandate of the Truth Commission was ongoing, it was not clear for them whether the legacy project will be in place. But once they collected all of the data and understood their richness, they decided that those cannot be kept like just by one report. which is published normally by the Truth Commission, and it should be expanded and also visible for everyone who want to understand what happened in Colombia. The same happened also with ICTY. ICTY has a seat in The Hague. It now was transformed to the residual mechanism. ICTY is an international tribunal, criminal tribunal for former Yugoslavia. And once upon the closure of the mandate, it opened the archives, because normally the narrative about what happened in the genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina is only around Srebrenica. However, almost the same amount of genocidal acts committed against those people were also in the rural area, but nobody focused on them because the public trial was only focused about Srebrenica and other cases. So now, upon the openness of the legacy project and the archives in ICTY, people from Bosnia and Herzegovina, historians and also our artists, try to relearn what happened there and try to revive and try to reconcile even within society the narrative of what happened during the war in the former Yugoslavia. Normally in literature, as I already shortly touched the topic of the Truth Commission, normally in literature, the narrative and the collective memory is being persuaded through the Truth Commission. And I didn't think to cover the Truth Commission because the operation of the register in The Hague and Truth Commission are very different. Register is trying to process all individual claim which people submit to it, while Truth Commission does not focus on any individual. It tried to identify the pattern of violence and then submit a report about the perpetrator and the type of crimes, amount of victims, but do not delve into any individual cases. At the same time, while this institution are quite distant, I still try to understand how they overlap because, as I already mentioned, register fully focus on the thematic area, which is normal for a Truth Commission. However, there was never a Truth Commission in the international armed conflict, which we have now within the Russian war against Ukraine. So when I started looking, and apparently since 2022, there is a lot recommendation and literature written that Ukraine must establish Truth Commission. And normally all of this recommendation comes from foreigners, from experts abroad, mainly from Spain, US, and Geneva. Obviously not consulting with Ukrainian society, firstly, whether Ukraine society wants to have a claim commission, what is the mandate, who should reconcile between whom. And also all of this research, which is being done abroad without a consultation with Ukraine, is normally just being in vacuum analysis and do not take into account all of the existing mechanisms such as register of damages sits in The Hague and also all of the other register which exist in Ukraine. And for me, if you provide this recommendation and then there will be a need to establish that claim commission, that Truth Commission, obviously, thanks. Obviously, there will be a potential overlap, and what I see is that it might re-traumatize victim because you provide the same information several times to different instances. And I want to tell one example which I have. It's a terrible example, sorry, but it's a war. So I have a very close friend. She's from Mariupol. Her father died in Mariupol in March 2022. He was not able to evacuate. The fact that he died was not known for 1 year, so it was considered that he's missing. She, considering that Mariupol is under the state security service, she went several times to interrogation with the prosecutor to fill all of the documents, and it took her almost 2 years to get all of the documents in Ukraine. Now there is open category in the register, and she will submit the same documents and will tell all of the same details, like still online, but she will still be potentially re-traumatized by returning to the same facts. And then, when there is a need, and foreigners say that let's establish Truth Commission for Ukraine, all of these people will come again to the same victims and will ask the same question, which doesn't make any sense. Because nobody is thinking about people who are affected by the war. It's just an all-fit model of transitional justice. The Truth Commission is a right to truth, and there is no other option available. So what I suggest is that if there is a demand from Ukrainian society, Truth Commission can be established, but only if there is driven domestically and not imposed from abroad. And then potentially the register can cooperate with the Truth Commission to transfer all of the data depersonalized if there is a need to try to avoid re-traumatization of the victims. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now for our last speaker, if you'd be so kind, we have Mykola Rabchuk.
Colleagues. Thank you. Dear colleagues, first of all, I'd like to add my humble voice to the thanks which were expressed here already to the organizers. And secondly, to apologize for not presenting my slides. I prepared them, but it's for 45 minutes lecture. I cannot afford it. So I'll try to contain my speech within 12 minutes, right? 12 minutes. Okay, I promised to organizers to talk about cancel culture controversy in Ukraine during the war. That means controversy which comes from attempts to ban, to cancel some phenomena from some works of Russian culture, monuments or whatever, in Ukraine, but also to encourage people to do the same internationally. So before I present my arguments, because of course there are it's huge controversy and very different arguments are for and against. I'll make two caveats. First of all, I'd like to emphasize that this term is maybe not very suitable because, of course, it relates to different phenomena. You know, cancel culture emerged long ago in Western context, and it's barely applicable to Ukraine. But of course, it can be applied because it has something in common. As I feel, it's also in the case of Ukraine, it also can be considered as an attempt of marginalized group of underdogs to challenge the epistemological dominance of other group. To question imperial knowledge, in this case, imperial culture, as a vehicle of imperial knowledge, to challenge established structures of cultural production and distribution. And secondly, I'd like also to emphasize profound difference between this ongoing attempts to cancel Russian culture and censorship, because we very often we can hear these arguments, this comparison. It has nothing or very little to do with censorship, because censorship provides is based on some legal on some laws and some enforcement of these laws. In this case, in case of cancellation of Russian culture, there are no laws which ban it. This cancellation is based primarily on verbal appeals to moral conscience of cultural entrepreneurs and of broader public. So there are no mechanisms, there are no laws which can be applied in this case. Rather, it's a matter of moral conscience, of responsibility, of empathy, of solidarity with beleaguered groups, with in this case with Ukrainians who are underdogs in the current situation. And now a little bit briefly about this the entire problem of cancellation, how it looks like in Ukraine today. No, first of all, of course, it's not matter of sanctions. Sanctions were introduced immediately after all-out invasion, primarily by first world countries. Virtually no countries from the global south joined these sanctions. They still apply arguments, very very cynical arguments, or as they say, pragmatic arguments. So they pretend that economic relations by buying Russian gas and oil has nothing to do with financing Russian army and killing Ukrainian civilians. Of course, it's very hypocritical position, but it's typical both in India and China and elsewhere, unfortunately. Culture is not matter of such of sanctions, but immediately after Russian all-out invasion, there were a number of appeals from Ukrainian Pen Center and from other from public intellectuals to international community, appeals to postpone publications of Russian books, to postpone invitation of Russian authors, to withdraw Russian plays from repertoires and on and on. So, of course, these appeals were in some cases they were perceived and adopted and applied. In some cases, ignored. But controversy emerged. On the one hand, nobody denies that authors who openly support Russian aggression should be, of course, cancelled. It's clear. So there is little controversy about this. If somebody, parades with St. George ribbon or makes photograph like Mr. Prilepin at the front line with weapon shooting Ukrainians and so on. So of course, these people are not acceptable, even though they were invited until 2022. They were broadly published, and invited, like Alexander Dugin, to various Western universities, even though he's clearly fascist ideologist. Nonetheless, it changed in 2022. But still, there is a question: who should be cancelled and who can be tolerated? This is one problem. So how to distinguish, good Russians and bad Russians? I would eventually argue that this is a wrong question, because in both cases, it works for promotion of Russian image. Either good or bad, either it's imperial culture or anti-imperial culture, it enhances the image of the rock state, volens nolens. And this is the main problem. From my point of view, the main problem, which very few people tend to understand internationally. For various reasons. Of course, some pecuniary interests play a role, because, of course, for many publishers and for theater owners and etc., it might be profitable to publish some Russian authors, to stage some plays, and on and on. So, of course, we cannot exclude this very, very pragmatic, very, very financial interest. But there are also other interests in play, and other factors in play. First of all, I believe there is very, very profound misunderstanding in liberal and democratic societies of the role which culture may play in authoritarian nationalistic states. Culture in such states is fully etatized and instrumentalized for the state purposes. And it's very difficult to explain, because this tradition never existed in normal countries, normal societies, but it has very deep roots in Russia, in the Soviet Union, and again in Russia. Culture, as everything, is totally instrumentalized, like church, like sport, like anything else. So it's not just soft power; it's harsh power. It's soft power which turns hard during the war, and this is what we have to understand. So the same can be applied also to contacts and to cooperation with Russian authors and scholars and on and on. Ukrainians again recurrently refuse to share podiums, to share conference venues with Russian colleagues, even if in many cases these colleagues are quite normal scholars, and many of them are oppositional vis-a-vis Russian regime. And nobody denies possibility of personal, of private contacts with these people. But what is disturbing for many Ukrainians and unacceptable, that such appearances in public may indicate symbolically some idea of dialogue, his favorite buzzword in the West, and some, possibility of reconciliation, and on and on. So during the war, during this genocidal war, it's impossible. It's not on the agenda, and this should be excluded. This is position of Ukrainian pen center, of Ukrainian intellectuals. We should not send this wrong, false signal about possibility of some reconciling. As long as there is a war, as long as there is genocide, we have to talk about these things and not about dialogue, etc. So metaphorically, we can compare culture, like sport, like anything else, symbolically to a national flag. It's national flag. Either it's either it's raised by Putinist group or anti-Putinist group, but it's national flag. It's Russian flag. And during the war, rising and waving Russian flag, from my point of view, is unacceptable. This is what Ukrainians say and try to convey to their Western colleagues, to their international partners. So maybe, perhaps, the last point is that Russian culture is not necessarily, which is very often cancelled, is not necessarily imperial. It's imperial, but it's not in a sense that imperial in terms of glorification of the empire, of imperial conquest, of imperial domination, of all this genocidal war. No, the best authors do not do this, with some exceptions. Of course, there are some very very bad poems produced by Pushkin or Brodsky, but it's rather exceptional. Most of them basically are good authors and produce good texts, which are valuable. the main problem of this culture, of this literature, is that it silences all these things. It says nothing, never said, and still say nothing about all these things. There are no remarkable works, or with very few exceptions, about colonial conquest, about colonial domination. It's absolutely non-issue in Russian culture, and this makes it fundamentally different from other imperial cultures like British or French or other which underwent all this process of revaluation, which produced very powerful, very strong anti-colonial discourse and anti-colonial analysis. Nothing like this has happened so far in Russia, and silencing is probably its main guilt. So what I'd like to emphasize once again that the main problem of our promotion, because basically this cancellation is not about total ban on Russian books or whatever. You can still read them, you can still watch films and so on. It's rather appeal, it's rather call to not to promote them right now during the war, to stop promotion, or as a former minister of culture of Lithuania put it, to put them into the fridge, to put them on the quarantine. And then to reconsider after the war, to reevaluate, to apply new methodology, new analysis, new canon. It's possible, it's necessary actually, but so far let's abstain from this. Let's not do this because it's waving the flag. It's waving the flag of rock state. And Volens Nolens, when we promote this very good culture, very good works, we detract attention from something more important related to today's Russia. Volens Nolens, we think about great culture, great literature, and for a few minutes, for a few seconds, we forget about killing of Ukrainian civilians, of destruction of Ukrainian cities. But these things go together. Moreover, today, these killings and these destructions are much more important than all this so-called great culture and great literature. That's another matter. That's another matter how they can coexist, and they coexist, unfortunately. That's another problem. It's a very interesting research problem how they go together. But the danger, the main challenge for us is to forget about this rock face of Russia when we read, consume this nice, very talented works. So be careful. And the last point, I'd like to give you an example. I didn't prepare. I wouldn't show you slides, but I'll give you one interesting quotation which perfectly illustrates something that many foreigners fail to understand. As I mentioned already, people mostly, especially in the West, they don't understand that any culture works for the state. In this case, for the rock state. Russian ideologists understand this perfectly. And here is quotation from director of Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, Mr. Mikhail Petrovsky, who is very ardent Putinist for many years. He supported him since early 2000s. And he, in one of the interview 2 years ago, he declared openly, so literally, our recent exhibitions abroad are just a powerful cultural offensive. If you want, it is a kind of special operation, which a lot of people don't like, but we are coming, and no one can be allowed to interfere with our offensive. This is words of cultural entrepreneur. And please notice that Hermitage is a museum with foreign art. So it's not Russian art, which is exhibited abroad. They brought abroad works from Hermitage, from Renaissance to Impressionists. So they don't promote Russian art per se, but they promote Russian museums. They promote, this gentrified, ennobled image of Russia, which today is a rock state. And people tend to forget that this is rock state when they when they visit these nice exhibitions from Hermitage. This is the main problem. So once again, please remember this peculiarity. And I will stop here. I exhausted my 12 minutes. Thank you for your attention. I don't know. Why?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
We have some time for questions. Here's one right now. I think yes, we have several hands over here. There's first one here and then in the back. Sure.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I have a question to Professor Mykola Repchuk because I kind of do research also in Vienna University with the Institute of Slavic Studies. And concerning what you've said about canceling Russian culture and this ambiguous point of view on it, so I rather need an advice because when I came to Vienna University and when I went to the library of joint library of Institute of Slavic Studies and East Central European History, I saw pictures on the walls, which I guess the person people who hang them there are proud of, like having the Dostoevsky Strasse in Vienna and Tolstoy Strasse. But this is not the worst. The worst thing I saw there was a book of Dugin in the shelves about Ukrainian history. And yeah, that's true. And also, that was a bookshelf the Ukrainian history, dedicated to Ukrainian history, and also a book of one Russian historian. I don't remember his surname. It is of 2015, something like that. After this 2014, when the war started, it was entitled like "What We Have to Do with Ukraine," something like that. How should we react on that? Because I went to the librarian, but to this desk and said that it's not okay. Should we kind of young scholars who see such things report to the leaders, to the chairs of it, or what? Thank you.
Should I answer?
No,
Okay.
of course, please.
Should I answer? Okay. Well, no, first of all, of course, it's uphill battle. We cannot win it so easily. We should not scandalize because it may provoke the opposite reaction, but try to explain, of course. It depends whether these books are in the public library or in the academic scientific library. This also makes difference because we in the university libraries, in academic libraries, we may keep everything, including Mein Kampf and whatever, and Dugin and whatever. Yeah, it's normal. In Ukraine, actually, Russian books were removed from public libraries, but still they're available in university and elsewhere libraries. So whoever is interested can go there. They are not just everywhere. Just like pornography, it's not completely banned, but there are special places to buy this magazine and whatever. So this is the difference. But on the other hand, of course, we have to explain that all the things are inappropriate, especially during the war. They are killing us. That's a fact. That's the main fact. Not Bolshoi theater, not great Dostoevsky, and so on. Unfortunately, the fact that this terrorist state has this great culture obliterates its wrongness, its ugliness. The main difference between terrorists from Hamas and terrorists from Moscow is that Hamas doesn't have Dostoevsky, Hamas doesn't have Bolshoi theater, and because of this, there is nothing to gentrify their activity. In the case of Russia, of course, there are many arguments to gentrify and to forget about, to push it aside. It's a secondary. The most important is great culture, and killing of Ukrainians is something temporary and can be neglected. That's a problem. So my response is to react patiently, try to explain, to try to appeal to some moral conscience, to say that they're killing us and you promote them. So promotion. So, we don't call for complete ban. We call for a limited, very limited, restricted promotion of Russian culture, of Russian books, of Russian authors. That's what the story is about.
Other questions? We have some hands up here.
Yeah, this is a question primarily for Christina Kozak, because you had touched on your work at The Hague and also touched on the massacre at Srebrenica. Generally, it's now accepted that Srebrenica was an act of genocide with the killing of 8,000 Bosnian men and boys. And that's in some ways the litmus test internationally in terms of what's accepted as an act of genocide. The question I have to you is to the degree that you've studied this and have interacted with a lot of scholars and attorneys in this area, to what extent is there a broadening consensus that Russia is committing genocide by intent? I mean, Tim Snyder talked about this when you're looking at that April 3rd, 2022 statement from Araye Novosti, which says we're prepared to destroy half of the Ukrainian population. That's at that time was 20 million people. The question is there a pretty strong consensus now? Are people still nitpicking what constitutes genocide or not in the case of the Russian invasion? And so I'd be curious to hear your response. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a really great question. Yeah, and ICTY's finding was that it was in Srebrenica was not genocide. It was Serbia failed to prevent the genocide to happen. So that was the accusation, unfortunately. Register in The Hague does not necessarily provide a legal examination of the Russian wrongdoing, saying that what is genocide and what is not, and only document all of the damages, destruction to have a material record when the negotiation will happen, potentially to say, we have an actual account of what Russia did and what Russia must pay. At the same time, your question, I would say that it depends whom you ask, and I would not say that there is a pretty much consensus that it's a genocidal war, at least with whom I'm unfortunately spoken. People sometimes even try to still avoid the term of war and try to just like soften it, Ukrainian conflict, Ukrainian war, which is like who is killing whom, why you are not naming the perpetrator. So unfortunately, I would not say that I saw a lot of people who work on this topic, but I know today there was a panel with another scholar from US, Christina Hook, and she is the one who is working on the genocidal war, and she tried to show that the genocide which happened, which was committed by Soviet Russia to Ukrainian with Holodomor, and the current war is a continuation of the genocide. But I would say that it's rather a minority, unfortunately, that see this war through the lens of genocide. However, I see this war as through the lens of genocide. Thank you for the question.
Good afternoon. Thank you for very interesting panel. I really enjoy all the speeches. I think I have it's not a question, it's more like my argument to the discussion that brought Professor Repchuk, because I was in Europe after, like, I was having an artistical scholarship in Europe after full-scale invasion. So I found myself like in the epicenter of these discussions. And one of the arguments that I used was, for example, at the time when famous Ukrainian film editor Viktor Onisko was killed on the front line, other Russian artist was making a performance on the topic like why Russians stay silent during the war, justifying like their motivation. It was very painful for me to observe it, obviously. And I had very tough discussions with my colleague at the moment, and I explained them that Russian artists should do their part of work with their society until they are properly not working with their society as they should, and bringing like really all these questions that they prefer to stay silent. They have nothing to say to the international society. They should give floor to Ukrainian artist who is killed at the moment or have no possibility properly to work, because it's also about the disbalance of powers. Because anyway, even as opposite Russian artists, they still are more privileged than Ukrainian artists who are physically killed at the moment. Yeah, thank you.
We have time for one more question. Yes, please.
Thank you for your presentation. I have questions for Olena and Mykola, I think. There are some like ballet troops have their tour through Europe and North America, and they presented themselves as Ukrainian troops, for example, Grand Kiev Ballet or Royal Ballet of Ukraine, something like this. And they dance in Tchaikovsky ballets, but with Ukrainian flag. And my question, is it some kind of threats during Ukrainian culture politic? And how to answer to Western colleagues when they asking why we should cancel Tchaikovsky ballets like in December, while fake Ukrainian troops still have the tours with Notre, for example. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I would say how I see it. Probably this is the problem for still disintegration of Ukraine's culture diplomacy and speaking the united voice, because there are a lot of actors of culture diplomacy: the state actors, the private stage actors, and since Ukraine is a democratic country, we cannot control everyone. What do they perform? Of course, you will never see such performance from Ukrainian state troop, but there is no control over private troops who are concerting in Europe. So, what the answer can be here is educating our own Ukrainians with why performing with Tchaikovsky is not okay. And recently, there are a lot of new Ukrainian ballets, including the Nutcracker with the Ukrainian music, which is developed last year. So there is a possibility to perform something else, and this is a matter of choice.
Please. I can just a few words. Regarding Tchaikovsky, we have different views with my wife because she believes that Tchaikovsky, like Gogol, should be appropriated by Ukrainians because of some Ukrainian roots or regions, which is basically a very reasonable approach. We can appropriate a lot of things which are believed to be Russian because they are ambiguous. To some degree, they belong also to Ukraine. But it's a remote project, and we cannot do this right now. We don't have sufficient discursive power and so on. But it's an interesting perspective. So far, I believe that, of course, we have to emphasize inappropriateness of this misusage of Russian text, of Russian music, and whatever. Symbolical importance of this, which Volens symbolically supports, contributes to empowers Russian dominance, symbolical dominance. But at the same time, to avoid too hysterical reactions, because of course, it might be counterproductive. So it's very, very, very complicated cultural diplomacy, but we should perform it, of course. What I'd like to emphasize here is that there are many works which Tchaikovsky is not irreplaceable. Nobody is replaceable. There are a lot of works which are simply not performed. Not only Ukrainian, but Czech and Polish and Croatian, whatever. They should be performed. So there are a lot of things which are forgotten or neglected or marginalized. So there is a huge space to feel this temporary emptiness if you remove Tchaikovsky or whatever. So let's promote it. Let's say that there are other options. We can do this, especially now, especially during the war. It's a very good actually opportunity to promote something else, to pay more attention to alternative cultural phenomena.
Another quick reply, please.
Yeah, I just would like to add to all this heritage and cultural issue. We also have to struggle with appropriation of Ukrainian culture by Russians, because all this exhibition from Hermitage, for instance, they utilize a lot of Ukrainian cultural product and presented them as a Russian. And again, Finnish case is also very interesting. So Ukrainian culture is unknown in Finland. And so it is really very important to show that, for instance, Alexander Bogomazov is Ukrainian paintist, but not Russian. Yeah, so I just encourage all of us to struggle with this in any way we can do.
I think that's a good moment to close things. Just as a quick announcement, I do believe there's coffee and snacks outside since Notre Dame. Oh, I'm sorry. Of course, please echo.
I don't have a microphone. I don't know if everybody can hear me. I'd just like to comment on this panel, which I think my comment doesn't necessarily is relevant not only to this panel, but to non-specialists or to a younger generation. What we're seeing right here is quite amazing for various reasons. Before our eyes, we have a broad generational spectrum. Mykola Ryabchuk
not everybody might know him, but he is really one of the deans of Ukrainian intellectuals. He is somebody, I can't remember the details. Mykola, correct me if I'm wrong. I think they threw you out of the university in the early 70s. He belonged to kind of a literary underground more than 50 years ago. And over those 50 years, he's written numerous books, been one of the most prolific Ukrainian public intellectuals publishing in English, working in different countries. And at the same time, he's accompanied by some people, I think they could be his grandchildren. And they're quite amazing, these women, representing Western Ukraine, where, Mykola was thrown out of the university, but also Kharkiv, which is right on the front. But Kharkiv actually is in Finland, in a place where there's almost no knowledge, as you just told us. So what, I don't know if Clemens is here. He's taking a break. But the Nanovic Center has put together an amazing program. And this panel is a reflection of both a summation and a presence of a long tradition of independent, creative, incisive thinking, but also you're seeing the future of Ukrainian studies and Ukrainian intellectual life. Thank you for giving me the time to say that.
We'll draw that to a close and recognizing that there's tea and coffee out there and reassemble in, I believe, about 20 minutes or so. Thank you.